What's up, guys? Welcome back to another series review. For those of you that are new here, my name is Jaya. I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday on bookish related content for the most part, with a little randomness every once in a while here and there. And I'm so glad to have you here today. For those of you that are returning, thank you for being here. It is always a pleasure to see your beautiful, well, I don't actually see your beautiful faces, but it's nice to know that your beautiful faces are here supporting this and enjoying this content. I hope that made sense. Basically, I'm just thankful for every single one of you because I have a very unhealthy relationship with fiction. It is truly an addiction and I love it and I'm here for it. And it's not something that I plan on correcting anytime soon. That being said, this particular series has been plaguing my mind for the past 3 years. That is right, 3 years. And finally, the last book in the series released this past April. And not even past April, it is still April. It's April 26th. Guys, my brain, I swear. But I was waiting for the third book in the series to be released in order to actually sit and read them. And I'm happy to say that I have finally made my way through the Lauren Roberts most talked about Powerless series, as well as the little novella here. And I can't wait to share my thoughts with you guys. Thank you again for being here. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. So I want to start off with the first book. The first book, Powerless, I think is absolutely epic. If you guys watched my Dallas video, I had literally talked about how I just started this book when I was on my trip there. And I think I got through about 2/3 of the book and oh my God. Excellent. So good. I can understand why this book has been hyped up as much as it has been because I absolutely adored every single thing about this book. First and foremost, let's talk about our main character. Our main character is a young woman named Peyton. She is what we call an ordinary, basically meaning that she is a woman who doesn't have magical powers but has to pretend like she does in order to survive in the kingdom that is slowly purging the ordinaries. Why are they purging the ordinaries? Well, back in the few years past, I want to say 10 years have passed or 7 years have passed, something like that, since the original plague was introduced into the population within the kingdom of... No, it's not Tando and it's not Dor. Where do they live? Isram. In the world of Isram, there was a plague that was released. And when this plague was released, the population either suffered and died from that or they ended up developing special powers. Now, the belief is that as long as the elite, those with special powers, continue to reproduce with one another, power will continue to grow. However, the belief is that if they mate with an ordinary or marry an ordinary or sleep with an ordinary and produce a child, that child weakens the strength of the power. And so the concern is that they want to do everything in their power to protect the elite. The king in this book is very cruel. He's a man who's completely driven by power. And the only people he truly loves or cares about are his wives. And I say wives in plural because his first wife has since passed and he's now married to his second wife. The story consistently talks about how the king has a thing for his wife and clearly respects her and loves her. And you can also see the relationship between the two brothers that are in this book. The first one is the eldest son who is being basically groomed to be the main prince of the kingdom, to take over the kingdom should his father die, and his name is Kit Azer. The second brother is Kai. Kai is a very powerful elite and unique in his power because he is a wielder, basically giving him the strength to take on any other elite's power around him and utilize it as his own. The king has basically trained his two sons to be either prepared to take over as king, meaning that Kit has sat through all the different lectures, knows everything there is to know about the kingdom, the trading routes, the maps, everything there is possibly to learn. And then you have Guy. Guy has basically been trained to be the enforcer. Now, as an enforcer, his role is to basically ensure that all the ordinaries or the threats to the kingdom have been removed. He is also essentially going to be the leading commander of the army and the single-handed powerhouse protector, bodyguard, whatever you want to call it, for the future king. So in this process, his father has broken him again and again and again, basically driving him to the edge in order to come to his fullest potential in his power. And meanwhile, he has been cruel and distant to Kit, but a slightly better father figure in the sense that he's trying to push his son to be the greatest king he can possibly be. The two brothers immensely love each other and are there for each other no matter what. And the beginning of the book, and the reason why all three of these characters end up coming into play with one another, is because in honor of the purge that took place 7 years ago, where the kingdom was basically rid of all of the ordinaries and the plague originally came and gave powers to the elites, the king hosts a set of trials known as the Purging Trials, which happens every year. And it is a chance for elites to compete in a series of 3 trials where they have to prove to the kingdom that they are the best of the elites. Whoever wins the competition basically walks out crowned as a winner. Now, most of the elites who are selected for this particular trial come from the royal families or from court members within the royal kingdom. So the higher level elites, if you will. However, there are also smaller areas of Isram that are considered more slum-like. They're older, they're more dilapidated. They have more ordinaries and mundane elites who are basically not the ones that have the more intense powers, but rather like simple powers like phasing through walls and things like that, where they have to select one person from their community to represent them in the trials to supposedly show equality. So altogether, I believe there ends up being 8 contestants in the trials, 3 of which come from the slums, essentially. And in that group, you have Payton. Now, Payton ends up getting selected in this process because she unwittingly ends up rescuing Kai, who is the younger brother who the king is training to be an enforcer. And this set of trials is also known to be unique because Kai will be participating in it for the first time. So throughout the course of all of this craziness that's happening, you have a scheming, ugly king over here who's just very cruel and wants to rid the entire society of ordinaries. You have Payton, who is just trying to survive and has been living in the slums for the past 5 years. And now she is being forced to go compete in a trial and basically prove her abilities as an elite, even though she is nothing more than a simple, ordinary young girl without any powers and is hiding from the dangers of being discovered of being an ordinary. And she happens to be competing with one of her love interests, who is Kai. And Kai is the enforcer that is literally being created to get rid of her kind. And in the midst of all of this, she also starts forming a relationship with Kit, who is the older brother ready to take on the throne. Added little wrench to all of this, Payton's father, who used to be a healer, has also been murdered by the same king. So she has a lot of hatred and animosity towards this king, which she cannot show because no one should be aware of who she is or who her father was in order to protect her life as well. So in this circumventous web of craziness that's happening, Kai, and Kit all start forming relationships with one another. I do think this book is absolutely excellent. I think it speaks a lot to the emotions that run deeper than just what we see at skin level. I think it's also a big comment on society and this idea of separation that exists in society today, whether it be because of skin color, racism, or, nationality, whatever it might be. There's so many different ways in which there's hesitancy between meeting new people. And I think it's really interesting with books like this because it separates all of that and it kind of shows that who you are as a person deep down internally is what matters. And the romance that buds in this book is so good. The banter is excellent and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Thoroughly enjoyed this book. I would say overall this was a 4-star book. Now, does it have the best trials that I've ever read? Absolutely not. Does it have some of the best banter I have read? Absolutely. And is it super high stakes enemies to lovers? Absolutely. So if you're looking for a good romantasy series, she's your girl. She's your girl. This is a great book. Really enjoyed it. Between 4 to a 4.5 for me. And that's all I can really say about it without spoilers. So that's where we are with Powerless. From Powerless, there was a small little teeny tiny novella that was published called Powerful. Now, one of the other characters that's introduced in Powerless is a character named Adina. Adina happens to be Payton's best friend. They have been living in the slums together for the past 5 years, and she essentially is also brought on with Payton into the trials to be her seamstress. Because of course, when you're living in a kingdom and competing in trials, you also have to have balls. So this book is following the story of Adina, sorry, not Aiden, Adina, who was pulled out from the slums and basically placed in the position of power in the kingdom to basically be the seamstress to her best friend, Miss Payton, as she is competing in this trials. And Adina, as her closest friend and confidant, knows things about Payton that other people may not know. Now, the beauty of this story is also the fact that you get to follow her story of romance and love as she's slumming it up and before she ends up going to the castle. I think what was really cute about this is like she's a character that is referred to throughout in the entire series, but you don't get to see too much of her throughout the series. So it was really nice to get a little taste and flavor of Adina as a character, her personality, just her heart, her kindness, her love, her sunshininess, and her love interest is a grumpy character. So grumpy sunshine all the way with this little novella, and it's so cute and it's spun so beautifully, and I absolutely adored this book. This book, I would say, was a solid 3-star read for me. It wasn't anything to write home about, but I do think the story was really beautiful. And once again, the banter, the idea of how their two are like creating a relationship between one another was poetry. And I think Lauren Roberts did a stunning job of writing about the different characters in this book, and it also gives you a better understanding of what the power dynamics are within the community when you're looking at the kingdom of Isram and the component of the different hierarchies of elites versus ordinaries and everything else that's going on. So this was a really fun book, would recommend reading. This book that I just mentioned, Powerful, could either be read right after Powerless or it could be read after Reckless. It can also be read after Fearless. So there's not a specific point in time that you have to read this book. However, I personally feel like after reading all of the books that it would have been better to read directly after Powerless, because I do think it flows with the storyline there. And then from there you can pick up with Reckless because it also gives a better understanding of the relationship between Payton and Adina as well. Moving on to the next one, the second book in the series is called Reckless. Now, in my humble opinion, this was the best of the three. Reckless is one of those books that's unique in the sense that you still have high stakes adventures that are happening. But the thing about this book that was also fun is you get to see more of the map of the kingdom. So in the first book, we learn about the kingdom of Isram specifically and that particular area. Now, outside of that, there is the Scorches, which is basically a giant desert that lays between Isram and the next adjacent kingdom. And then you also have the Shallows, which is basically a bunch of really, how do I put it? It's untamed waters, if you will. And after the plague hit, there are also supposedly stories of creatures that have also mythologically changed within the waters that are dangerous as well. So basically in this book, you get a little taste of some of the other dangers outside of Isram and why the different kingdoms have kind of been shut off from one another and Isram is kind of on its own. So in this book, you also get a little bit of a picture of Dor, of another city, which is called Tando. So that's also really fun, just being able to see that. So when you're looking at this guide, you can kind of see the different areas here. I'm so sorry, by the way, I have completely screwed that up. Isram is only talked about in the third book. We have not seen Isram yet. That is completely incorrect. The city I was talking about in Fearless that exists that they all live in is Elia. So the kingdom of which Kai, Kit, and Payton and the king and everyone come from with the elites is Elia. So within Elia, as you can see, this is kind of the area that they're in up here. Now from here, these are the Scorches, which is the giant desert that they have to cross to get to the next kingdoms. So in this, you have Dor on one end, which is up here, and then you have Tando on the other one. So these areas are kind of explored in this book, and then you get a hint of the water in this, but not too much. In the third book, we will explore the Shallows when they're sent to Isram in order to trade. And that's why that city is in my mind. But no, they are from the town of Elia. Or the kingdom of Elia. Now, in Reckless, it's really interesting because you have outcast situations that are happening. Payton's on the run. Kai is after her. And he basically has to drag her back to the kingdom under the orders of the king. Now, the crazy thing that happens with this is, like I said, adventure. And it's great because there's a lot of like underlying betrayal and craziness that's happened at the end of the first book that is kind of reset where Payton and Kai stand. And he, as the enforcer of the king, has to go capture her and bring her back. But but they now have a budding romance. So now as they're on the run and as he's trying to bring her back, he also has a soft spot for her and wants to protect her. And the romance in this book is unbeatable. The banter in itself is absolutely excellent. The crazy adventures that they go through, the kidnappings, the all kinds of bandit attacks and the fighting between one another, all kinds of crazy things happen in this book that are just so easy to eat up. And I think the reason why I liked Reckless in particular for the romance is because in Powerless, you do get glimpses of the romance and it is starting and you can see the infatuation that they have with one another, but it's still in the setting of trials. So it's a little bit different. Whereas in this book, you actually get a little bit more one-on-one of Kai and Peyton's story. So I think that part was definitely a lot of fun. This book I thought was absolutely excellent. This was a solid 4.5 stars for me. I just think this one was a lot of fun. You also see Peyton kind of starting to realize a little bit more about herself and gaining more confidence in her abilities and standing up for herself. You also see her grappling with this idea of what defines power and how far can a person go in order to come into that power. How much darkness are you willing to give into in order to protect yourself and keep yourself alive? So there's a lot of crazy things that are happening in this book in that regard. And then Kai is also forced to look at himself in this book and really question why he follows the orders of his king. Why is he expected to go out and mercilessly murder these people or, banish them to get out of the kingdom just because they're ordinary? So there's a lot of different moments in this book where the two characters do a lot of growth and they do that growth with one another. And that's honestly what speaks to me about this book. So it was absolutely great. So if you're looking for adventure and romance out the wazoo, this is definitely your book. Also, I would say both Powerless and Reckless are closed door romances. So that was also kind of nice. You get a hint of the romance and you definitely have that intense banter and you still get the joy of finally seeing their lips meet, but you don't necessarily have to read the in-depth steamy scenes. So I did want to put that out there. It is a relatively low spice set of books, but it is excellently written and the banter is phenomenal. In Powerful, I would say the spice level is a little bit more heavy, maybe a 1.5 chili, but again, not anything too strong. But in this, keep in mind the entire romance of these two side characters is literally written within 220 pages. So a completely different vibe there, but still excellent nonetheless. And now we get to Fearless, the final book in the series. This was not my book. I still loved the overall end of the book. I still loved the overall relationship story between Kai, Peyton, and Kit in this book. I like the fact that, she had to reestablish her role within the kingdom of Elia and where she stands as their potential queen or princess. I like the fact that you kind of got to see the relationship between all three characters and the growth of those relationships. I like the fact that a lot of the older characters that you were introduced to in Fearless that you didn't get to see in Reckless were now back in this story and you were able to kind of get their perspectives. It's also really interesting because in this book, you do get some flashbacks from the king as well, from his perspective. So that was also fun to read. But my biggest frustration with this book is I felt like a lot of it was slightly far-fetched, and I did feel like this book was dragged on a little bit longer than it needed to be. Now, this is a me thing, so if you loved this book, I have no judgment towards you. I still think there's a lot of excellent points to this book. I just think that within the series, it was not the right book for me. I feel like it could have been a solid 100 pages less, which is probably why I struggled. My favorite part of this book, though, is the fact that Peyton is once again sent out over the ocean in order to talk to the town of Isram. And I did appreciate the fact that we got a little bit more of the landscape and a little bit more of the world that they live in. But again, my frustration with this part was the fact that not much happens. It's many chapters dedicated to this adventure that's taking place with very little that's actually happening. Another thing that I did struggle with is in this book, Peyton is expected to go through another set of trials on her own, only this time she's trying to prove herself to be worthy of the crown of Elia as an ordinary who would be marrying an elite. So again, a very interesting concept considering the fact that we just went through trials in Fearless and now we're back again with trials in Fearless. But I do think overall it was a great storyline. I do think it wraps up the story altogether pretty well. I do think a lot of the reveals were very obvious for me. Some of the you know, characters that are doing double crossing and betrayals. I just kind of predicted it. I think some of the relationships in terms of whose child is who and like reveals of like all the crazy politics and who cheated on who and who was actually the king and queen and all that kind of stuff was interesting to read, but again, slightly predictable. Overall, I just think this book, while it was very, very good, I just felt like it was a little overly complicated for no reason. And I think it was a little longer than it needed to be. That being said, I still gave this book a 3.5 stars. I do think it's still an excellent read, and I do think it was a fun finishing finale for the entire series. But if I had to be honest, my favorite book by far in this series was Reckless, which is the second book. And then I loved Powerless quite a bit, and Fearless would be a solid 4, actually. I do think I liked Powerful even more than Fearless. But the one thing I will say that Fearless did amazingly is the relationship between the two brothers and Peyton. That was beautifully done, and I think the way that that was kind of explored and looked at was really interesting. You also find out a lot of secrets as to how the elites came to be and why this is what it is, what the plague was, like all this kind of stuff. So a lot more history in this book as well, which I think was really nice, that was needed for puzzle pieces of the book to come together. Overall, I think Lauren Roberts has spun a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story with this lovely trilogy, and I would recommend everyone to read this if you're looking for a fun fantasy series that has a new world for you to explore and an enemies to lovers that is worth dying for, because quite literally that is what they're doing. They're in a position where they are in love and they may have to kill each other. So it's an absolutely fascinating set of books, and I do think the enemies to lovers was excellently done. Fearless, I would also say, is a 1.5 chili, by the way. I do think there was a little bit more open door romance in this, but again, nothing too intense, nothing too aggressive. And I just think the ways in which these two characters lean on each other and melt into each other was beautiful to read. So overall, strong series, would recommend, and it was an absolute pleasure and joy to be able to get my hands on all 3 of these beautiful copies and to be able to sit and read them. And that is pretty much all I have for you guys today. So if you made it this far, thank you so much again for watching through this video. If you guys have read Powerless yourself, or you've read the series, definitely let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below, because I would love to know your takes on it. Also, if you guys feel like you want to read it or you have any questions about it, please leave me comments. I'm happy to always read that too. And I just really appreciate you guys being here on this journey with me as I continue to slowly bridge the gap of my growing TBR and my actual read collection of books. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are, morning, evening, or night. And I will definitely catch you on the flip side in the next video. If you loved this, consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. I once again put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And wherever you are, I hope you have a blessed day. Mwah, mwah, mwah. See you on the next one. Bye, guys.